So, Asta, do you know how many portals this is?
I have not counted, no, but
No.
I've done some math.
Yeah?
I don't think we have enough flint and steel for this.
No? I got this, I went and enchanted, a ridiculous amount of flint and steel here. They're all
Good.
unbreaking mending, and you said that you still don't think this is going to be enough?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Let me
All right,
let me
well-
light one portal, get this to take some damage real quick. Let's see if I can damage this. Okay, so if we can get, well, 5, 6. Okay, it took 6 portals to light one. And there's
Okay.
64 durability, so we might have enough.
Well, they're mending, so just don't break them, please. Try
Right.
not to. And then, let's light all these portals and see if this is going to be enough. And then if not, we can go to the zombie pigman farm and repair
The
them
mending
up.
is definitely a good point to have on these.
Yeah. I thought I was being ridiculous when I made this whole thing, but it turns out this actually isn't probably going to be enough. Let's find out.
Oh,
So I did actually end up having enough flint and steel. I actually had quite a few extras. I ended up breaking 2 of them, and then I lost another one when I died. I was lighting portals, and one of those sword piglins got me, and I didn't even know he was there. Just like, he killed me so quick. I don't even know what happened. And we looked everywhere for my items, and it looks like I've lost my pants, my boots, and my pickaxe, and I'm very, very sad about it. I've been doing really, really good, and this is the first time I've had to replace any netherite goods, and I'm super upset about it. But we've got all these portals lit, and this farm is going gangbusters. So this here is the actual farm itself. Look at that. That is crazy. These portals won't produce as much, but as the corner ones, these portals are actually just to keep that area loaded because we've got piglins coming through them. The primary portals we're dealing with are the 4 corners over here, and then these ones, and then there's actually one underneath me that doesn't produce much at all, but look at that go. That is just crazy. Just so many piglins coming through here, this area. Oh, that one's actually popping pretty. Yeah, this thing produces 100,000 gold nuggets per hour, but it's not without its costs. So a lot of the expense that went into this, actually most of the expense that went into this is all right here in all of these portals. This is about 80,000 obsidian. And not only is this super duper expensive, it took a long time to lay it all down. It took us about 3 days. Astazora actually did most of the work because it was timing. I was still working on my last episode, and Asta really wanted to get this done, and I can't say I blamed him. I helped when I could, and it definitely went a lot faster when both of us were working together. But we finally got it all laid down. This is not for the faint of heart. This is a very grindy, very expensive farm. This is not for everybody. It is, it does create a lot of gold, but there are probably much easier ways to do this. But we thought it'd be a fun project, and so we went for it. But let's talk about the failed project that preceded this. So Asta's first idea was an overworld-based portal farm, and I was openly skeptical at first, and I started to come around a little bit, but I knew this is just a massive project. This would have taken us weeks. This is 250,000 obsidian right here. And then all the trapdoors. I was starting to look into ways to reduce the number of trapdoors, so we were using iron trapdoors instead of wood trapdoors because iron's actually quite a bit cheaper for us, and it's not as hard to place. You don't have to place it and then flick it to close it. Yeah, this is just ridiculous. All the wood that would be required for this would have taken us a very, very long time to build. And if it had been like a massive gold farm, it probably would have been worth it. But we were testing it, and we were finding that each row was generating about 10,000 gold nuggets per hour. So we were looking at 50, maybe 60,000 gold nuggets per hour. And for the amount of effort required, it just didn't end up being worth it. And it was really hard for Asta to let this one go, especially because we spent a long time working on this rail system. So we got this rail system that sends out multiple carts to clear out this as quickly as possible. So it's off. So it sends out carts. It actually won't keep loaded because this farm is so big that I'd have to stand in the middle in order to keep the carts loaded through the whole run. But it will send carts multiple times to clear them all out. And then we came up with a system to get them down through mine carts, spread them all out, and then get them out into water as quickly as possible so that we're clearing out the mine carts. I don't know what happened here, but we were really happy with this minecart based system, and I'm hoping we might still have a use for this at some point in the future. Like if we had a really insane mob farm, this might be a really great way to collect all the mob drops and stuff like that. But the rest of this, yeah, this isn't going to happen. So Esther still wanted a gold farm that was faster than the one that we had. And so I was looking into other gold farms, and I was looking at Nembaum's gold farm, and at the very end of his video, he very briefly discusses the possibility of a portal-based gold farm, because piglins will actually spawn in the portal blocks, and then they will immediately teleport into the overworld. This is the same basic logic that we use in our slime farm. And his was a 2 chunk by 2 chunk one, and it generated about 50,000 gold per hour. He largely dismissed the idea, saying his was just as fast and that this was just a super grindy task. And he's not wrong on that last point. But we wanted to see if we could get it even faster. And originally, we tried 4 chunks by 4 chunks, but there's something weird going on with despawn spheres, and it actually still calculates despawn spheres across dimensions. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but the portals we had for the 4 chunk by 4 chunk were just too far out, and they were despawning the second they hit the overworld. And so we had to bring it down in size to 3 chunk by 3 chunk. It's possible you could get it a little bit bigger than this, but this worked pretty well. And so we ended up with 3 chunk by 3 chunk, generates about 100,000 gold nuggets per hour. So the 2 chunk farm only needed 1 portal on the overworld side, but the 3 chunk farm actually needed 4 portals, 1 on each of these 4 corners, in order to make sure that all of the portals on the nether side would pick one of these 4 portals as the closest available overworld portal. And if we hadn't done that, then the pigmen would actually just stand around. They won't create new overworld portals. They'll actually just stand in the portal and eat up the mob cap. So that's pretty bad. So these 4 portals are the only ones that are actually required by the system. And then the other 5 portals we set up in order to make item management easier. So originally, our idea was to have item management local to each of these 4 portals. And then when you came over into the overworld, all the items would start moving into a central storage location. But we realized it didn't take us actually really long to realize we could actually just have 9 portals, and that would keep all of these chunks in the area loaded so that we could actually just have a central storage location. So that's what we got over here. We got 3 of the 4-speed shulker box loaders. That's what's required by the system. And then we're actually throwing away the magma creams and definitely the rotten flesh. But we do get magma cubes in the system. You can see down there, kind of, there is soul sand with wither rose on it. And actually, these glass tubes needed to be made bigger. We were doing a bunch of testing, and the magma cubes were actually shooting through the glass when we had smaller configurations. So I did a whole bunch of testing and figure out the smallest available size that would still contain the magma cubes. So that's the tube that's required to contain the magma cubes, and then we're just killing them on wither roses. They are a huge pain to deal with, and then we're just throwing away the magma creams. But we were only getting about 1,000 per hour, and since this thing creates 100,000 gold per hour, you're not going to AFK it for very long. So that's pretty much a negligible amount of magma cream. It just wasn't worth saving. We've considered it, and we decided not to. And then over on this side, we've got a crafting system. This is pretty much a necessity for a system that creates this much gold, is you need some way to easily convert that into gold blocks, because otherwise, yeah. So this thing, again, we've got a closed loop system that feeds the shulker boxes back into the system and then loops them back around and everything like that. But this thing eats up 58 shulker boxes per hour. And we've got maybe 30 in it right now. We are seriously running low on shulker boxes. So we really actually can't operate this farm for very long right now. So we're going to have to do something about these shulker boxes. And I think I want to set up the shulker farm now, but I said that before we do that, we need to figure out a mob switch. So this is the villager breeder that I set up in the last episode, and it looks like we've got about 29 of them jumping up and down in here. And I actually had to make some changes because they were using the water as like a jump off platform, and it was super annoying. They were just like constantly moving. They're still kind of annoying, but this is definitely a lot better. So I raised that water up a block, and that actually made, oh, looks like we got a couple more that just poured in. We've got a bunch of babies down there that are waiting to grow. So yeah, the building ended up looking ridiculous because it was taller. So I came up with this design. It's boring, but it matches the aesthetic around here, which admittedly, this is one of the first buildings that I set up on this island, and it's starting to look a little boring. So I might want to change this up at some point in the future, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it right now. So I just made it match. I actually had a much better design, but it just didn't look good next to these other buildings. So I went with boring red and gray, and it works. It's fine. We'll leave it like that for now. So if we come down here, I've actually doubled the number of cells that we had here. So the food is being split across both of these cells, and so we've got 4 cells now, but I'm definitely seeing some issues here. For some reason, they are failing to breed from time to time, which wastes food, which I hate it when that happens. And I'm not sure why they're failing to breed. I removed the glass that was above their head. I don't know if that was the issue. I need to put in some more food and do some more testing. But another issue that I'm seeing is that the babies actually end up having a decent number of food on them, and they'll actually be down here throwing food at each other. So that wastes food too. So this thing is doubly wasting food. So one of the advantages of putting them on top of the lantern and end rod is that the babies fell right away, so that they didn't end up collecting any of the food that these villagers throw to each other. So I might have to do something else with the villager breeder, because I need 141 villagers. What I want to do is I want to set up a mob switch in the overworld. We're actually going to need more than that, because I want to finish up the mob switch in the nether as well. And you can do that now with zombie villagers. As long as you've traded with them at least once and then you turn them to a zombie villager, they will not despawn, and they will eat up the mob cap. So saw one of them take damage. That was a little worrisome. It might have just fallen, in. Okay, we're not going to worry too much. So yeah, if you trade with a zombie villager, they will not despawn, and we can use that to create a mob switch. But we're going to need a whole bunch of these guys. Yeah, it looks like they're taking damage when they fall. That is a little bit concerning, but I think it'll be all right. Nope, I actually just watched one of, yeah, they're dying. That's not great. So let's put some panes in here. I didn't like the way this looks, but it gives them some more room. I think they're crowding each other, and I might have to change the design again, but oh, we don't want to remove them all. That'll free them. Should be able to get, oh, there we go. There we go. This will give them some more room, and hopefully they'll stop killing each other, but it doesn't look really great. That's why I wanted that other way, because it looked a lot better, but it seems, villagers, you guys are so annoying. So I made my way over to spawn, and it has been well established that this leaf block right here is the spawn point for the whole world. So I found this using a compass, and if you come in with a compass, it will point to the center of these 4 blocks right here. And then this one right here is on the southeast corner. So this way is south, and this way is east right here. So This just also happens to be on a chunk border, which isn't necessarily always true. So in that case, this right here is the center chunk for our spawn chunks. This is the point of reference I will use for all the calculations that I needed to do. So if I start at this chunk and I go 9 more chunks out, yeah, it's 9 more chunks, then I will reach what is called the entity ticking chunks. So this is all of these chunks. Anything in these chunks will entity tick. They will operate completely normal, redstone, everything like this. And then if I go one more chunk over, this is just called the ticking thing, where a limited number of actions will occur in this chunk. Redstone won't update, a few other things like that. And then if I go one more chunk over, this is the spawn chunk's border, and almost nothing occurs in this chunk. However, as far as I can tell, any mobs in this chunk will still continue to count towards the mob cap. And then I have double checked this. So another thing that I've done is I've gone through and I dropped a bunch of items on the ground. As I was walking along, I just continued to drop items in a trail all the way over through all this. And then I went through that portal there, and then I went somewhere else for 5 minutes. And then I came back to spawn chunks. And when I came back, the items up until this glass block, this chunk, so the chunk border right here, items on this side had despawned, items on this side had not despawned. So in the ticking chunks right here, items do not despawn. And I checked that in creative, and that it appears to be the case there as well. So I've done as much as I can to make sure. I'm still a little fuzzy on this logic. I'm hoping this all works, because I don't want to have to build all this and then find out that we've got to move it because I missed the chunk border or something like that. But I'm pretty sure that if I dropped all the items and then I find where they start to despawn, and then I go 2 more chunks, because there's the ticking chunk and then the border, and this is where we want to place our mobs. And we actually want to straddle this chunk border right here, so that if I move the mobs over into this side, then they're in spawn chunks and our mob switch will be on. And anywhere in the world where I go, no mobs will spawn. And if I move them over here, then they're not in spawn chunks anymore. They won't count towards the mob cap, and mobs will spawn normally. So I can turn this on and off, making it a mob switch. That's kind of the point. So this should work. This will, by the way, mean that anytime we're in spawn, that all of these will be loaded no matter what, and mobs won't spawn. I'm largely okay with that. We've got enough problems with mobs in the spawn chunks and lighting it up and everything like that, so I'm perfectly happy with that. So the next thing we need to do is build all the pins that we're going to keep these guys in. Alright, so these are the cells that we're going to keep the zombie villagers in. It should be 25 per cell, so times 6 is 150 zombie villagers. And if they end up being a little bit overcrowded, then we might have to expand this a little bit. We'll just kind of see once we get them all in here. I was originally happy to just keep them in a glass cage, and I asked Astazora, and he's like, well, if we're putting them at spawn, maybe we should make it look like something, make it look kind of, at least decent. So he came up with the idea of jail cells. And I think these are pretty close. I definitely like the theme that we've got going here. They might look a little bit like mausoleums, which is actually kind of fitting anyways. I don't like particularly that they don't contrast with the background as well as I might have liked. So Astazora had the idea of using lava to brighten it up or something like that. Maybe some other bright things to brighten it up. We're going to test that, but I think I want to get the zombie villagers in here first. Maybe it should be the other way around, but I guess we'll see. I just want to get this done because I've actually spent quite a while working on this. So the idea here is actually really simple. We've got water dispensers. There's just an observer under this light, and it just sends a redstone signal down to power all the dispensers. So that actually reverses the flow of the water when we do that. So this is off. The zombie villagers are pushed over onto this side. And this is on. The zombie villagers are pushed over onto this side. So very simple logic here. So the next step is actually getting all the zombie villagers into these cages. All right, so I put quite a bit of work into the system here. Right now we are sitting at 57 villagers. I haven't been spending a lot of time AFKing at this area, and I've also sent some of these villagers on their way. So what we got to do is we got to push this button to send them to right here. And then my old system, I used to convert them into a trade right here. I could have a bunch of things, but I've been testing this and testing this and testing this, and I spent a long time. And for some reason, they will not take a job here, no matter what. I've had them sitting here for 20 minutes. They will not take a job. All of these guys over here have jobs, and none of these guys over here seem to be taking the job. They might be too close or something like that, but I've had problems with this for quite a while. When I first did it, it worked really fast, but it slowly started getting slower and slower and slower, and now they won't take a job at all. So the idea was that I'd send him here and then give him a job and then send him off to the nether, but this doesn't work. So I'm probably going to have to rework this and this at some point, but again, I just want to get this done. So we'll worry about that at some point in the future, because I probably will want to get some villagers to have trades while here, and this obviously doesn't work. But for now, I've come up with a better way. So what we do is we push this button, and it sends them off on their way. So I needed somewhere to put a switch selector, because I'm actually going to keep this part of it where I can send them to the nether. And this wall is already full of buttons and switches. This one calls for a villager. This one sends them on this way. This is the garbage circuit, and this one sends them upstairs versus downstairs in this building themselves. So what I've done is, if I'm sending them upstairs, it actually sends them underground first. So I've added this extra selector over here, and this sets it to turn on whether or not I want to send them to the nether portal. So if we come down here, this is the way that was already there, and if I've hit that selector, then it's going to divert the rail down here, and there's a activator rail right there that sends them straight into the nether portal, and then the cart goes back and gets recycled into the system, just like everything else. But this is all working, and then we got to come over and go into the nether. So that portal I set up underground will just sync to this same portal here at the nether hub, and this portal just syncs right back to my main base. So that other portal actually doesn't interfere with this portal at all, but any villagers I send through it will come through this portal, which is why I want to keep that system, because it might be useful at some point in the future to send other villagers into the nether. Now I'm going to get rid of all this at some point in the near future, but the ability to send villagers to the nether and then send them somewhere else, that'll definitely be useful at some point in the future. And then I've added a whole bunch of extra stuff here. So originally I tried just putting rails here with some string and an observer that's setting off a cart, but they actually won't, they will avoid walking onto rails. So instead, I've got this weird rail configuration. I've used this before, where it comes underneath and it'll actually grab the villager from there, so that they'll actually walk onto this block, because otherwise they'll just stand in the portal. They don't want to walk on the rails for whatever reason. I think it's to keep rails clean so that we don't have mobs walking on our rail systems and bumping into carts and stuff like that. Most of the mobs seem to avoid walking on rails. So I had to set up this system right here. So basically, we just send off a cart, collects them, and then I've got a queue system right here. And all this does is there's an activator rail here that sends a signal back to this piston right here. So this first piston is just held with a torch, and I can push a button that'll release that guy, and he'll go into the overworld. And then that one holds this one, and then so on. And this is the guy that we just sent through. He's already come through into this system, and I've set up a bunch of stations right here. This seems to work pretty well. Looks like this one's missing one. Doesn't seem to matter. I picked clerics because they always have this trade right here. 1 emerald for 2 redstone dust. Very cheap trade. Doesn't take a lot of effort, and redstone dust is still very useful. So that's an easy way that I can get the trade done, because you have to trade with them. Otherwise, none of this works. You have to actually have traded with the villager. So once I've done that, then I can send them on their way. So we are just barely within the chunks that stay loaded. Now, I could have Astazora stand here and keep all these chunks loaded so that they go straight through into the overworld, and I wouldn't need this queuing station. But that actually wouldn't work either, because they wouldn't have spent enough time here because there's the portal cooldown, they'd just stand in that portal. They wouldn't teleport. So let's go ahead and send one of these guys on his way. We'll actually send a couple of them. Should be fine. We'll send all 3 of these guys. And they will just get sent into the overworld. And again, those carts get recycled right back into the system. And let's go over to the overworld side. So here I am at spawn, and we've got the same basic system over here. And by the way, I've set up jump boost beacons so that I can get out the backside. I can jump on top of these 2 blocks right here, and the portal is actually 4 high. So that's how I can get out of the portal without triggering this whole system, in case you were wondering. And then we've set up the same basic queue system over here for the same reason. All of these chunks won't stay loaded. Those last 2 chunks of spawn, man, spawn chunks are weird, but yeah, they won't leave a rail loaded. So we've got to queue them here for a second, but you can see the 3 of them sitting there on the queue, and we don't have to do anything special with them at this step. All we have to do is come here and then send them on their way. And so I can push this button. Might as well do it all 3 times, and then we can watch it happen. We'll come over here, and I've set up the same basic thing. I've used this at my trading center before. So basically there's just an observer with a string, and that fires that piston. That's a little worrisome. They still seem to work. I might have to do something better. I'm not actually recycling the carts like I did with all the other systems. But yeah, so that just lets them, they fall into there, string triggers the observer, piston either moves this block in or moves it back out when the string isn't being triggered anymore, and that drops them down, and the water will actually absorb the damage from the fall. So the last thing I need to do once I've got all the villagers in here is just put a zombie in here, and then that'll do all the rest. Like once one of them gets turned, basically they're all going to get turned. In retrospect, it might have been easier to just bring 2 villagers here and then set up a breeder over here and not have to deal with all these queue systems. I'm not entirely sure. Breeders aren't super easy to set up, and these queue systems actually were pretty easy to set up. My initial plan was to use my trading center as the means to set their job and do the initial trade, and when that didn't work, a few things got improvised, and we ended up with this system. And now that I have this system, it's obviously easier to just use this versus setting up a breeder now. That wouldn't make any sense. So we'll just deal with the system we had. I'm not sure if it would have been easier to do it the other way around, but it looks like we're not going to be able to finish that on this episode. I still have to breed over half of the villagers, and I got to get them all moved. There's just a lot of grind left, and I'd like to save that for between episodes. So we're going to have to wait until the next episode before we see this mob switch actually working. But until then, I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye now.